What's up guys, got a little something different for you today. I'm going to be doing a review of the Lumix G7. And I won't typically do tech reviews on this channel, but in this case I feel it is warranted. When it comes to choosing a camera for video purposes, there's a whole lot of information out there. It can be really hard to sift through a lot of it. A lot of people just default to Canons, namely the Canon 70D and Canon 80D. But for video stuff, I don't really think that makes sense. In my opinion, the G7 is one of the best beginner to intermediate cameras you could buy for either vlogging or filmmaking. I might be a little positively biased towards the G7 because I upgraded from the Canon EOS Rebel T3i. So right now I am shooting on the Lumix. So the picture you see right now is the Lumix G7. And in terms of performance, features, picture quality, the G7 just absolutely smokes the T3i. That might be a bit of an unfair comparison considering this guy came out in 2011, but I imagine there are a lot of people that are in a similar situation like myself who are looking to upgrade from something that is more or less their first camera to something that's a little better. So this picture is from the T3i. So this little dude can shoot full 1080 HD at 60 frames a second or 30 frames a second, and can shoot 4K at 30 or 24 frames a second, which to me right there is kind of the knockout punch for something like the Canon 70D or 80D. One thing that's really frustrating about Canon is that they have some of the most unbeatable autofocus in the game. It is incredibly fast, incredibly responsive, and is almost always in focus, which is great for video, but then at the same time, the 70D does not do 1080 at 60 frames a second, which to me is inexcusable. And that's something that was really extremely frustrating for me with Canon. I don't understand why you would put all that effort into your autofocusing technology and then just not have 1080 at 60 frames a second. 60 frames a second is kind of invaluable if you're shooting sort of like a montage type thing, or you have sort of a cut scene with music and you have footage that's a little bit shaky. Slowing it down can do wonders for that. And at least for me, stylistically, I do that a lot. And not being able to do that was just absolutely maddening. So to have a camera that for the body only costs around $800 for the 70D and around $1,100 for the 80D just doesn't seem to add up. Now the 80D does do 1080 at 60 frames a second, but it doesn't do 4K. And this little dude does do 4K for just $500. Whoa. Another really cool thing about the G7 is that it's a mirrorless camera. Typical DSLRs have a mirror that will flip around to record the image, and unfortunately what that means is that you can't see what you're recording through the viewfinder if you need to. With the G7 you can. So you can record and simultaneously look through the viewfinder, which is really nice if it's super bright outside and you can't tell if stuff is in focus or overexposed. It's easy just to pop that viewfinder up and look through there, and there's really no question if your stuff is blurry or overexposed. It's really nice. So one thing that's really great about the G7 is that it has what's called focus peaking. For those of you who are not familiar with what it is, you'll basically never question whether a shot is in focus or out of focus ever again. I'm zoomed in on this lamp right here, and you can see all those blue lines are showing you basically exactly what is in focus. I can bring it out of focus and those lines go away. And if I bring it back in focus, the focus peaking starts working there and showing me exactly where the focal plane is, which is just really invaluable for never having to guess whether something is in focus or not. The other key feature here is, so these zebra lines here are basically showing you that all that stuff is overexposed. That's very useful as well. The T3i does not have focus peaking or zebraing, just like the 70D and 80D. So what that means is with those cameras, if you're not filming in a studio environment, if you're outside in the daylight, it's going to be difficult to focus it. From my experience, I spent a lot of time doing this nonsense, trying to figure out if it was really in focus or not. And even when I was trying to pay very close attention and focus it, a lot of the times it really was not in focus, and I'd get back and have slightly blurry footage or slightly overexposed footage. I just really wasn't sure what I was getting.
Roll, experiment, everybody's eyes in the rocket and point at it as it runs. Tab 51 in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, start.
That makes me excited. That makes you nervous.
So if you're going to be out in the field or outside or wherever filming, you really do need focus peaking, or at the very least a viewfinder. So I did mention Canon having ridiculous autofocus capability. The Lumix G7 is still pretty good in that department. The face tracking works pretty well. If I'm not trying to autofocus on my face or someone else's face, I'm typically doing manual focus. It also has another really great feature where it can do long exposure time lapses, which are really cool for if you have like a scene of like a carnival, or like you're trying to shoot a star time lapse. The G7 will automatically take whatever length exposure you set for a set duration and then slap that into a time lapse, which is really convenient to not have to do any of that in post, because that takes a long time in post. Now, one big drawback for the G7 is that it is a micro four thirds camera, which means that it runs on a smaller sensor than a full-size DSLR sensor. So what that means is that you can't use any other lenses except for a micro four thirds lens with this camera. You can see that this is a Canon lens and this is the Lumix lens, and they're very different sizes. And that might not seem like too much of a downside to you, but the big drawback is that micro four thirds lenses are notably more expensive than full frame lenses. So even though micro four thirds lenses are a little bit more expensive, the kit lens that comes with this camera is pretty good. This is the kit lens and it's really not bad. So as you can see in the mirror right here, I'm kind of holding it at arm's length on a little bendy tripod, so that gives you kind of a sense of roughly how wide this lens is. Now you can buy this 45 to 150 millimeter lens on Amazon for about $100. It's pretty solid too. So if you're the type of person that likes getting a lot of lenses and having a lot of options, you're going to be spending a little bit more with this camera. By and large, most people will find the kit lens with the addition of this one to be pretty good. And I really do think that for the money, the camera itself beats the pants off of a lot of its competitors. I actually didn't really think about how I was going to end this video, so I guess I'm just going to leave you with a bunch of test footage.